This is like the core of the problem statement that this episode and Rand's blog post talks about, which is like, when you ask it once, it's giving you 6 to 8 different responses. And he makes a good point that I agree with. Most regular users are just like, okay, great, these must be the most popular ones. And he's like, but you could just ask the next day or in 10 seconds later, or you could just be another person who is asking that at the same time, and it's giving you totally different responses. And if you happen to run that prompt once, or your AI visibility tool runs it once and you're mentioned, it'll say, congratulations, you have visibility here. And you'll think, you'll report to leadership. Like in ChatGPT, we're mentioned in dental CRM. Look, we're good. And then the CEO's really happy and everyone's happy. But if you just ran it again, you're not mentioned. How do these tools control for that?
Yeah, it's not the same as SEO rank tracking. SEO rank tracking, there's a lot of consistency in where you show up, and that really matters. And here it's saying, if your brand shows up, that's what matters.
Welcome to the Grow and Convert Marketing Show. I'm Davish, that's Benji. We are talking today about the extreme amount of variance in AI search results. Meaning, when you ask ChatGPT or Perplexity or Google AI Overviews or Claude or whoever a given question about products, and then you ask it again in a new incognito browser or just over and over again, every time it's giving you a different list. And for marketers, the challenge that presents is, how do you even understand or track your quote unquote GEO or AEO performance or your AI visibility? We have a solution for it that we apply to our clients that we've built in months ago into our tool, AI visibility tool, Traqer. But what we're going to do in today's episode is walk through this research that Rand Fishkin did and published on the SparkToro blog, and we'll look at his specific graphs and we'll talk about that so that you guys have an understanding of it. It's a pretty dense, really good, really interesting set of data. And then we'll talk about the implications of that, and we'll look at the end of how we try to solve it through Traqer. Sounds good, Benji?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so for those of you watching on YouTube where you can see the graphics and all, we'll show the different graphics. Here's Rand's blog on the SparkToro blog. We'll put it in the show notes. For those of you listening, we will explain almost all of this verbally, so you'll be fine. So this is his blog post. We're just going to talk through a few key graphics because it's for those that are not, let's say, into math and statistics, it's a little bit dense. And so I've reduced this to a few key takeaways and graphics, which we'll put on the screen at the same time. Number one thing, let's explain what did they do. Rand and it sounds like a friend of his, Patrick O'Donnell, they gathered 600 volunteers and they looked at some like a few dozen or a dozen or so different prompts where someone is asking about a product recommendation in either like examples are like dental CRM, an e-commerce consultant and cloud computing in the B2B space, to a bunch of B2C queries that are, some of them are not even that like businessy, like best sci-fi novels, chef's knives, or even men's fashion Instagram like accounts or whatever to follow. And then a couple local ones like Seattle real estate and LA car dealerships. So what they did was, for each of these topic areas, like dental CRM, they came up with 12 or so different prompts of different ways people could phrase it. Then they asked their 600 volunteers to run those prompts over and over again, and they accumulated it. And they say in the thing they get almost 3,000 total answers sets, like from ChatGPT, Claude, and Google. They call it Google AI. It sounds like it's Google AI Overview. And then they looked at all of the different products that are recommended. So for dental CRM, for example, it's showing in the graph that on average around 6-ish CRMs were recommended in each response. right? And we're talking about like, and they have 87 total runs or responses of that across the three platforms. And not across, I think for each of the three platforms. And so then they just see what are the dental CRMs. And so what's really interesting is that the number of total unique brands mentioned. Let's use dental CRM as an example. You guys can see the graph if you're watching on YouTube, or you can pull it up later based on the link. But using this as an example, about six or so responses or different brands are recommended by the CRMs between ChatGPT, Claude, and Google AI Overview each time. But over 50 different dental CRMs were mentioned across the 87 times this was run by their volunteers. For ChatGPT, for Claude, the graph has like kind of some loose scales. So I'm looking, it's about 25 to 30 different CRMs mentioned. And Google AI Overviews, it looks like 55 to 60. And so this is like the core of the problem statement that this episode and Rand's blog post talks about, which is like, when you ask it once, you go to Google and you say like, hey, I'm looking for a CRM for my dentistry practice, or you go to ChatGPT and ask the same thing or whatever, it's giving you 6 to 8 different responses. And he makes a good point that I agree with. Most regular users are just like, okay, great, these must be the most popular ones. And he's like, but you could just ask the next day or in 10 seconds later, or you could just be another person who is asking that at the same time. And it's giving you totally different responses. Well, asterisk, we'll see later, it's not actually totally different. But if you ask over and over again for something where it's like 6 responses per message, there's actually a total of 50 to 55 different CRMs mentioned.
Yeah, I find this interesting from a couple different perspectives. So one, I actually think that this blue line is probably Google AI mode, not AI overviews, just because I have a very hard time seeing how there's that much variability in AI overviews. I don't think they explicitly say, but I would have to guess that is, yeah, AI.
No. He says it's Google AI Overview unless AI Overview didn't show, then they just asked in AI mode. So I don't know exactly which ones are AI mode, but by default it's AI Overview.
Okay, yeah, then I think what's really interesting here is how much variability there is in AI overviews or in AI mode from Google. Yeah. I've seen a lot of the variability on the ChatGPT side and some of the other LLMs, but usually the brands that are mentioned or our rankings, when at least we look at them in Ahrefs, are pretty consistent when it comes to the AI overviews. But maybe that's preceding some of the stuff we're going to talk about later on, which is
Right.
brands being mentioned overall.
Which is to say what you're saying in a different way. I think what you're trying to say is the consistency we see could be that, I don't know, we're kind of now just revealing the end punchline, which is really interesting. The most popular brands actually are consistently mentioned.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like the total number of brands, like when you just sit and think about this, because the chart is pretty dense, and you're like, ChatGPT and Google AI overviews are showing 6 to 8 different, brands per response. But if you just ask 87 times, actually, both of them, it's like 50 to 60 different unique brands were mentioned.
What's crazy is what we were talking about last week, the JH comment, in terms of JH is another colleague in the industry who runs growth plays, but he made this really interesting comment on LinkedIn about he finds it really fascinating how many people implicitly trust AI for their answers.
Yes.
And what's fascinating about that is like, if you were to run these searches and the person's just running a question and then getting an answer back, and they're implicitly trusting this as like the go-to list, but there's actually this much variability in the answers, I just find that fascinating. So 50 different companies could be mentioned, but the results that you're getting back from AI, the person just trusts as that's the list that I should trust and go do research on. But that list can potentially change so many times just depending on how you word your question or the day or whatever. It's just really interesting to me.
Yeah, he mentions that explicitly, and he uses one of the buckets in here, cancer hospitals. And he says, like, for health in particular, Google has all of these strict requirements, right? Of like the websites and the EAT score and all this. Casual people are assuming this is like vetted somehow.
Yeah.
And I think his wording, Rand Fishkin's wording in the post, I would say, if I wanted to nitpick, is a little bit harsh here. But he says, like, these tools should come with a disclaimer. I don't know if he's saying this facetiously. I think he's kind of serious. That says, like, there's some randomized lottery system happening here.
No,
Like,
I think he's probably very straightforward. He's always been big on that. Just holding Google or whatever search engine accountable to the answers because
yeah. Because in particular for health, you think like, so that this is cancer hospitals, but this is just an example, cancer hospitals. But his point is like, people ask Google and ChatGPT in particular nowadays for really specific health advice. I think I did ask ChatGPT the other day for something, I forget. And it did say, I noticed it said, I am not a doctor, but. And so I imagine they like put that in there for like legal reasons, or lawyers told them to make sure it always answers medical questions.
I think they also released something recently where they have their own health product now. Like you can't ask it certain health questions. I'm guessing just because there's probably going to be lawsuits if there is this random data that's coming back or random answers.
So this is the problem to the consumer now. Going to marketers, now the big problem is if you're looking at your GEO performance or you're looking at your AI visibility and you run a prompt in one of these like AI visibility tools, and we'll talk about how Traqer solves for this, we think, or at least is better. But if you take one of the out of the box AI visibility tools that are popular and you sell a dental CRM, and one of your prompts is, I have a dentistry practice. Can you recommend a CRM to me? Whether you are included or not, it's like there's 6 brands on average mentioned in a ChatGPT response, and you could be one of 52. And if you happen to run that prompt once, or your AI visibility tool runs it once, and you're mentioned, it'll say, congratulations, you have visibility here. And you'll report to leadership. Like in ChatGPT, we're mentioned in dental CRM. Look, we're good. And then the CEO's really happy and everyone's happy. But if you just ran it again, you're not mentioned. How do these tools control for that? How are you controlling for that as the marketer who's like doing GEO, whether or not you're using a visibility tool? That's kind of the core, the problem statement to the marketers that Rand sort of presents here. So I'm going to go into some more detail that he presents. In this chart, there's 3 graphs. ChatGPT, Claude, and Google AI Overview. And he has 2 bars for each of them. And he says, bar number 1, blue, the odds that this same list of brands will be in 2+ responses. Meaning, in that dental CRM, there's like 6 brands mentioned in a response. When they ran it 87 to 100 times, depending on which of these topics and whatever, how many times of those 87, let's say for dental CRM, was the list identical between the two? Was the actual brands that I mentioned identical? It was for ChatGPT 0.74%, less than 1%, less than 1 in 100. The same brands were mentioned twice. Claude 1.6%, Google AI Overview 0.8%. So that's just another way. It's another way of saying the chances of any 2 times you run the same prompt of you getting the same 6 or 8 or 10 or however many brands the LLM gives you, of it being the same brands, 100% overlap, is more or less 1% or lower, 2% or lower for Claude. And then, so that's just this, it's the same thing we just said, it's said in a different and I think interesting way. But the purple bar I think is really interesting. I'm going to put some words into his mouth. So he didn't say this, but I'm saying this. He then looks at how many times is not only the brands the same, but the order that they appear the same in the response. It's minuscule. It's almost never. 0.1% for ChatGPT. 0.1%. 1 in 1,000. 0.07% for Claude. 7 in 10,000. And 0.28% for Google AI reviews. And this is this thing where everyone's obsessed over the like order of your brand. We're number 2. We're number 3. And this chart basically throws that out the window and says, guys, the order is totally random.
Yeah, it's not the same as SEO rank tracking. SEO rank tracking,
Right.
There's a lot of consistency in where you show up, and that really matters. And here it's saying if your brand shows up, that's what matters.
Yes.
It's not about the order. It's about if your brand can show up multiple times for that same prompt or the same topic, that's
Yeah.
where you're gonna win here.
And so, like, we try to be pretty candid and more transparent, more candid than others on in all of our content, but in this sort of show podcast as well. And so I'll say that when we look into Traqer, when we look at some of ours, we do have, or you click into any given prompt in Traqer, we do have the rank number of like what brand is mentioned where, right? So I'm looking at a particular prompt. What are the best content marketing agencies for B2C brands in Perplexity? And it shows like rank number two, grow and convert. It's something we should think about and talk about is just saying what are the brands that are mentioned and getting rid of the rank, which, like you just said, is kind of an artifact of all of us in this space.
Yeah, we're just used to reporting
Right.
like this.
The muscle memory and habits we're used to, which is SEO muscle memory.
But I think also it does matter to the customer. So I think that even as grow and convert, now taking ourselves out of Traqer or anything like that, you care where you're mentioned in that list because again, if you're mentioned number 10 and someone doesn't make it all the way down there, it somewhat matters.
Yeah, yeah, but what Rand is saying is that's just noise. That if you just hit enter again, you could be number two. It doesn't. It's just totally random, and
I
so
get that.
it would be. But it's something. It's something to like for us to consider and
Yeah.
think about. Is even that word rank. Even that word rank is just SEO terminology. That's not a thing. It's like brands that are actually mentioned, and then we'll talk later about Traqer in more detail. We have some ideas that we're going to be thinking about as a result of this. To put into Traqer of looking overall. He has another chart then in the same vein that just does it for Google AI overviews and says, the numbers are just minuscule. Like we're talking about the same list being mentioned sometimes 0.0047% of the time. You get the same brands twice in this category of luxury real estate agencies, Seattle or whatever. Home studio microphones, 0.0220% of the time, it was the same list. So that's the same thing. And then we get to what is the second most important or like the big kind of takeaway that you and I already kind of, let the cat out of the bag here. Rand then does, I think, a very smart and responsible thing and says, okay, fine. We take the first plot and the thesis of like, it mentions all these random brands. 6 brands of a response. You ask 100 times, 50 plus different brands are mentioned. How do we make any sense of whether you're visible or not? And he says, well, let's look at the most mentioned brands, the most common or most mentioned brands in each of these categories. So going back to dental CRM, remember they ran it 87 times. And in ChatGPT, he's looking at the number 1, the number 2, and the number 3 most mentioned brands. And out of those 87 responses, the most mentioned brand was in 58 out of 87. The second one, 54 out of 87. The third one, 50 out of 87. For Google AI Overview, for this particular one, there's even more consistency of those. 80 out of 87% of the time, the most common dental CRM was mentioned in 80 out of 87 of the runs. And the second most, also 80 out of 87. And the third, 66. So he then has this big takeaway, which is kind of what you were getting at about like, in our data from all of our clients, when we look in Traqer, there seems to be a lot of consistency in Google AI overviews. Is if you are one of the top few, and I don't think I'm going to say top 3. He looked at the top 3, but he doesn't say anywhere that 3 is some magic number and after that it drops off. But if you're one of the
Yeah.
most popular ones, there's actually surprising consistency that even though the order is totally random, and even though the other brands mentioned, there'll always be some randomness in there, that the top few ones are just mentioned consistently over and over again, like greater than 50% of the time for most of these.
Yeah, I would say that consistency number, whether it's 3 or 10, probably depends on the category and how many players there are in that space.
Yeah.
And that can change. Like you think agencies, there's probably a lot more agencies that could be considered top than, let's say, I don't know, some consumer product where there's, I don't know, one product has massive market share.
Yeah, for as an example that I think he even mentions that cancer hospitals, there's not a lot of like top cancer hospitals in the US to choose from. My red box, apologies to those watching on YouTube, I just realized is is shifted over slightly and it includes the blue bar from Studio Mics. That's a mistake. But if you look at Google AI overviews, it's like out of 71 times they ran it, 67, the three LLMs, ChatGPT, Claude, and Google, 69, 69, 67. The top cancer hospital was in almost every single time they ran it. 69 out of 71. So every time except 2 times out of 70, the top one was mentioned. So this then opens the door to how a brand should be gauging and looking at their visibility is when you ask these LLMs in multiple different ways. Remember, they tried 12 different prompts. When you ask multiple times and in multiple different ways, you need to be thinking of your visibility as what percentage of those times do I show up? And I have a couple other charts where he literally introduces this concept. I think he literally says in the post, more of these AI tools should be doing this, is looking at like a visibility percentage. And so we want to then transition to Traqer and how we do it. And let's get really specific on this, because I think a lot of people listening might be like, yeah, visibility percentage, my AI tool does that, right? Like Peak, Profound, and all of these, you open it up and it has a visibility percentage across the top. But that's not what he's talking about. That's a different percentage. That is like across all of the prompts that were run that day or that week or that time or whatever, how many of the different prompts, you could be asking wildly different things. How many of the different prompts are you cited once or brand mentioned once? So that's not what we're talking about. He's saying if you ask the same thing over and over again, look at your average percentage of those runs that you're visible. If you're one of the top brands and you ask 100 times or 71 times here for cancer hospitals, and your hospital is mentioned 69 out of 71, you're going to have some 90 whatever percent visibility. You're doing well. If you're mentioned twice out of 71, you got lucky those 2 times, but you're not really visible for cancer hospitals.
Let's show Traqer, because I think we happen to build Traqer pretty much to solve this problem. But I think now with a lot of this evidence, it just helps make the case for how we're approaching Traqer differently than a lot of the other AI visibility products.
Yeah, I mean, we have outlined this in previous episodes, but we had, what we call Traqer 1.0. This is Traqer 2.0. In between, we sort of noticed this and said, hey, like every time we run this, there's like a different response. Now, kudos to Rand for quantifying it and collecting the data, but we sort of anecdotally noticed it. And our solution is this kind of topic-based organization. So for those of you listening, I'm now screen sharing Traqer. You can go back and look at this on YouTube. You can check out Traqer yourself. But when you set it up, by default, not as an option, but by default, when you set up your brand, the number one thing you need to do is pick topics that you want to track. And a topic is something we're looking at Grow and Convert, content marketing agency, SEO agency, B2B content marketing service, B2C content marketing service. So those are topics. And then what Traqer does is it runs 5 different prompts in that topic that are related to that, which is 5 different ways you can ask about it. The first one in bold is always just that exact topic name itself. Why is that relevant? It's not realistic for ChatGPT, but for Perplexity and Google AI overviews, people in Google, absolutely people still type in things like short keywords, B2C content marketing service, what I'm showing now on the screen. But then it also asks natural language sounding questions, which you can edit. So for B2C content marketing service, zooming in on this for a second, the second and third one are, what are the best content marketing agencies for B2C brands? And I have a B2C business and I'm looking for a content marketing agency. Any recommendations? I think those are basically asking the same thing.
They are.
But in this particular run, the first one, what are the best content marketing agencies for B2C brands? We are not mentioned. Grow and Convert is not mentioned. In the second one, I have a B2C business and I'm looking for a content marketing agency. Any recs? We are mentioned. This is exactly what Rand is talking about. If you didn't do this, if you didn't ask about B2C content marketing in 2 different ways, if we asked in the first way only, we would say, oh, Benji, we're not mentioned. If you asked in the second way only, we'd be like, Benji, don't worry, B2C, we got that covered. We're mentioned. We're one of the ones mentioned. Neither of them is a true story. It's that there's some frequency, some percentage of times you're mentioned. So for Traqer, you ask the same topic, you go at that from multiple different angles and ways, and then it tells you the percentage. Here, out of 4 different questions about B2C content marketing, services, we are mentioned 1 out of the 4 times. So Traqer says you have 25% visibility. And you can open up the graph and see how that's changed over time.
This is one of the most interesting things because we noticed this early on too, where one week we would show up in ChatGPT, the next week we'd fall off. The next week we'd show up again, the next week we'd fall off. And I think the report by Rand really helps explain why that's happening, and then also why you need to track this over time and through different prompts.
Yeah, so in the dark blue line here, which is Google, you can see back in November, we were at, 25 or less percent visibility. And recently, starting December 12th and onward, we've been at 50% or over. So you can see like an overall trend. Again, I want to be very explicit here because we think about this all the time, so it's obvious to us, but it may not be obvious to everyone listening. This visibility graph is not the same as the overall brand visibility number that most of these tools show you when you click into your brand as like the first graph, and it'll give you a single number. Grow and convert, 34%. That is how many totally different prompts are you visible for over time. This is the same topic. So we were literally trying to solve the same problem that Rand's post kind of presents. The same topic, B2C content marketing, asked 4 different ways. How many, what percentage of those 4 are you mentioned? And so this is how you can start to gauge, are you one of the most mentioned brands that is going to be kind of mentioned regardless of however anyone asks about it at any given time? You're probably going to be mentioned or not. And so so I'll show you an example. If we go to another brand that we're tracking, and we're one of our clients, ServiceTitan is an absolute leader in their space. And if you just scroll through, look at these percentages. HVAC business management software, 100% ChatGPT, 80% Perplexity, 100% Google AI Overview, all of them brand mentions. And like, we're asking about HVAC business management software in 5 different ways. This is what we mean is when you see this, you're like, okay, we're one of those common ones. We're one of the most mentioned brands in Rand's study language for HVAC business management software. Like, we're good here, regardless of how you ask about it, how anyone is in the real world is going to ask about it, or how many times they ask about it. The chances of us being one of the brands listed is very, very, very high. And then you can look at the graph and be like, yep, they're just hovering. I open the graph, they're just hovering in the like 75 to 100% over week after week after week. This, we think, is the responsible and accurate way to report on GEO. Not you ran this one prompt once and this week it happens to mention you.
Yeah, do you want to show the new report that we built in there? Because it's a good, I would show it actually on ServiceTitan.
Okay. So to add to this, at the top, initially we have this classic percentage, which is more analogous to the visibility percentage of all these other tools. We had the same thing. So we're showing ServiceTitan, ChatGPT.
Yeah, that seems to be
There we
wrong.
go. It's just a
There we
refresh
go.
issue. ChatGPT, 74% visibility, Perplexity right now, 48%, Google, 78% or whatever. This just means whatever prompts you happen to be tracking, how many of them do you get a mention? But there's some issues with this, which is if you start tracking additional topics or prompts that are more ambitious, let's say some topic area that you want to have visibility for, but you don't yet. Right? We have countless clients over the years have done this where we're like, yeah, we built our name in this space, but now we want to move to this, we want to move to the enterprise, or we want to move to this other side thing.
Or we
whatever,
came
right?
out with some new feature that we hadn't talked about before.
Right.
There's always new things, yeah.
And so the marketing team, the content team should start tracking this in whatever tracking tool they do. But if you start adding those topics, you don't have visibility yet, and all of a sudden this percentage goes down. And we were like, this is artificial and weird. And so what we've built in is additional ways to do it. And the one we want to talk about that's relevant today is what we call topic visibility. And what it does is it creates 3 buckets, and it says high visibility for how many topics that you're tracking are you mentioned 67 to 100% of the time, like in the top third. You're like 2 out of 3 or higher percent of the time of the prompts you're mentioned. Medium is like middle, and low is you're mentioned at least a couple times. And so you can track this and see, like, at a topic level, ServiceTitan in this case, we've only set them up with 8 topics in Traqer. They have a huge business. We could have this be 80, right? But in this particular instance, eight out of the 8 topics, 4 of them, they have top tier high visibility, meaning the majority of the time they are visible. The other 4,
I think the simple way to say the high is no matter what prompt you were to type in around this topic area. So if you were to ask the question of field service management software in multiple different ways, if you have that high score, you're more likely to show up as a brand mention
very
than
likely.
not. Yeah.
And medium is like you're pretty likely. It's 34 to 66% visibility in that topic. And then low is you're mentioned a little bit. So, you can see like for ServiceTitan, it's 4 of the 8 is high, 4 of the 8 is medium. And so they're sort of killing it. We are very much in agreement with Rand's study. We have observed this. We've tried to build this into Traqer, and then we can close with some forward-looking things. We actually think, if we go back to Grow and Convert as an example, that B2C content marketing service. So that B2C content marketing service, if you asked in one way, we were not mentioned, in another way, we were mentioned. A couple details. We're working on an overall filter to change all of these numbers to only brand mentions. That's something to think about. This Rand study is looking at that generated output text by these LLMs and how many times is this particular brand recommended or mentioned as like, do this for dentist CRM or cancer hospitals or those categories they tested. A lot of these other tools, they're just counting your visibility on citation as well. We are right now, but we're like very close to releasing something, just a simple toggle switch where you count all of this for brand mentions only. Now, right now you can see, for those of you looking at the screen, we make it very explicit and clear on the overview page which of the prompts you have a green filled in brand mention versus which ones you only have a citation. You'll later be able to get these numbers and stats soon to also only count brand mentions. The second thing is we have the data already of the historical data of running the same prompts over and over again. And so we're working on, in the early stages of talking about and working on, how can we let in Traqer someone see some more advanced analytics saying, okay, not just this week, but over all of the times that I've been tracking this topic in Traqer, what's my cumulative, like over the month or over the, all time, what's my cumulative topic visibility percentage? Because you can see here for ChatGPT, for B2C content marketing agency, that's the orange line. So if I turn the other 2 off, that's the orange line. We happen to have one this week. Last week we didn't, the 2 weeks before we did. And so like overall, you can get a more accurate picture. And so that's kind of how we're thinking about things.
Even what's interesting there with the orange line is something that we did in November, December has now improved visibility going forward, which I think is very interesting. So that's kind of what you're talking about, is like, if you're directionally moving in the right place, how could we better show that in the product, that there's more consistency on brand mentions now versus 2 months ago.
Yeah, but overall, like you guys, you need to be thinking about AI visibility in more of this kind of average, over multiple data sets, over multiple runs. How often are we mentioned? You need to be thinking about it that way, not just like this one prompt, this day, we happen to be mentioned, so we're good. That's sort of irresponsible or just very inaccurate.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. You can also get the audio-only versions of these shows wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow us at growandconvert.com/newsletter for any articles and updates for when these videos come out.